All right, so welcome to today's session on business planning. This is the fourth in our Creating a Winning Marketing Strategy series over the last 2 weeks. This is our fourth session. If you missed any of the first 3 sessions, you can go to our YouTube channel, go to search for Greater Hartford Score on YouTube, and you will find all of our videos and webinars out there across a wide variety of topics. So we ran a poll to start the series, or to start today's session. So let's see here. It looks like in terms of what stage of your business in, just over half are startups. And then we've got a couple who are growing and a couple who are mature. Business type, consistent with what we've seen across this whole series, mostly professional service with a little bit of retail and e-commerce. That's good. Have you ever prepared a business plan? 1/3 of you have, 2/3 have not. So, okay. I think this will help in terms of what we've got planned for today. I think the content will help most of you, regardless of what stage your business is in, and we'll go from there. So I think we can close down the poll. Thank you for completing that. All right, so let's jump in. So oftentimes when I'm talking with a client who is just starting out, or if they're trying to revisit what their business idea is going to be, especially some folks who have never owned their own business, try to have the truth, what I call the truth in advertising conversation with them. And so there's some misconceptions about owning your own business, which all of you probably know because you are running your own business. Some people think it's just a few simple steps like get online, sell your product, make a bunch of money, kick back and relax. Not that easy, as all of you know. And what I like to focus my conversations on with my clients at the beginning of their planning process, whether they're just starting out or they've been in business for a little bit of time, but they're trying to figure out where to go, is focusing on the customer. And there's a few set of key questions that we're going to talk about over the next 2 slides that really address a lot of your kind of business planning ideas. Before you kind of start the narrative of a business plan, there's some key questions that you're going to answer. Now, the first set of key questions are these ones here. These are the ones that Kathleen and I, as mentors, talk to our clients about. If they're just starting out, we say, you need to have answers to these questions when you're starting your business. And this is also helpful for businesses that have been in, for business owners who've been in business for a while, and maybe they've seen their sales stagnate, or maybe they're thinking about expanding into a new product or service or location. It's always good to step back and revisit these questions. So here they are. What's my big idea? What is your idea for your product or service? Who is your target client or customer? We talked about this last week, right? Kathleen talked about finding your target customer and identifying them. What problem am I solving for them? This kind of goes back to the storytelling aspect we saw last week with Kathleen's presentation. How do you turn your story into something compelling for a client? Understanding who your competitors are. I advise clients to think about casting a wide net in terms of who their competitors are. It may not just be somebody in your specific product or service, but maybe someone in the family of products or services that you offer. And then lastly, how are you going to differentiate yourself from your competitors? Why are customers going to choose you? These key questions are kind of the early stages of business planning, and they answer this one. Is there a business here? If you can have good answers, you don't have to have it fully fleshed out, but if you can have good, solid answers to this, it answers the question, yes, there's a business here. And then the next step is to go to this next set of questions. This helps build it out a little bit more. So we talked the other day about having a website that can help help generate sales and connect with your customers. That's more of a, how do I connect with my target customers conversation? How will I make money? What's my revenue model? What am I going to sell? What am I going to charge for it? How am I going to deliver it to my customers? We talked in May about some budgeting tips. We're not going to go too deep on budgeting today. This is going to be more about business planning, but budgeting is a key component of business planning. How much money do I need to get started? This could be if you're just starting out, or it could be if you're expanding your business into a new product or service. How much money do you need to get it up and running? Can I survive financially until my business generates a profit? A lot of times people are starting a business on the side while they're still working full time. Understanding what that investment is going to be before you start turning a profit. Are you going to be able to handle things with your second job? What are the outside trends that may affect my business? What help do I need? Business owners can't do it all themselves. Sometimes they feel like they have to, but you can't. You're going to need help. And then, is owning a business good fit for me? And I have this comment here about persistence is essential. It's true. It's not for everybody. And this is part of the what we call the truth in advertising conversations we have sometimes. We're understanding if owning a business is really the right fit for you in terms of what you want to do with your career. So having a good answer to these questions answers this one. Is this a viable business? So the first slide was really about, is there a business here? Now it's about, is this a viable business that I should move forward with? So this is a construct around business planning, and it's a 4-step model. It's not, perfect for everybody, but helps resonate with me and clients that I've worked with. And the first two columns on the left are a back of the napkin scenario and then kind of a resource plan. Think about these two parts of the planning process as part of those set of key questions that I just mentioned on the previous 2 slides. So the back of the napkin is not really a business plan. It's more of a, hey, is there a there? Do I think that there's a business idea? And is there something that I think I should pursue? And maybe I do a resource plan to help figure out how much money I need to get started. And I don't have to have it all figured out, but maybe I need to have some sense of idea to decide, yes, I want to move forward. And that gets you to kind of a go or no go decision. You'll notice at the bottom of this slide, there's this timeline of vague to highly detailed. And what this means is when you're in the first early stages of business planning, your kind of short ideas are going to be pretty vague. They're not going to be fully fleshed out, but you're trying to get a construct to understand, should I move forward with this? But as you move through the business planning process, it needs to get more detailed. And I'm going to show you 2 different examples of what a business plan could look like as we go through this. And kind of the first one is really what to start with, and then you can get into a more detailed plan as we go forward. The other component of business planning that I think is important for people is a lot of times folks say, I need to do a business plan, and they think I'm going to prepare a spreadsheet because I need to have the numbers. I need to know what my sales and expenses and profit are going to be. And I think sometimes the mistake people make is they start with the numbers and then they figure out the strategy later. And I try to encourage people to say, the strategy is going to drive the financial outcome. And there's some critical components of the non-financial aspect of a business plan that you really need to consider. Marketing, sales, and operation. How are you going to find your customers? How are you going to sell to them? And how are you going to run your business day to day? If you can figure those things out and figure out your operating model and how it's going to work in developing your product and service that's going to resonate with customers, that will result in the financial outcome. If you develop the spreadsheet first and try to force a strategy to meet the numbers, odds are it's not going to work. Now, you may do the strategy, you may do the marketing and the sales and the operations, and then prepare a set of financials and determine this isn't good enough. That may tell you that you shouldn't move forward with the business, or maybe you need to go back and revisit your marketing and sales strategy. So I'm going to talk in a minute or so about how this is a bit of an iterative process. So remember, strategy, marketing, sales, operations drives the financial results, not the other way around. We're also going to spend a minute or 2 on action planning today, how to turn your business plan into actions. We're going to talk about SMART goals. Hopefully you've heard of that term before, and we'll reinforce the importance of that. So if you're considering a business plan, where do you start? The first is to kind of think through the scope of what you want to do. If you go search business plan template on Google, you will probably find 100 or 1,000 different examples of things you can do. Sometimes you're going to find a 50-page template, and sometimes you're going to be so overwhelmed and say, I can't do this. It's just impossible. And you may just hit that proverbial brick wall and you can't move forward. So ask yourself some key questions as you're thinking about a business plan. The first is, who is it for? Who's going to read it? And my advice would be, it starts with you. You should do a business plan for yourself to at least have your goals and objectives and your strategies and your action plans outlined on a piece of paper. It's important to have these written down so that you know where you're going. You may also be doing a business plan for a bank if you're applying for a loan, or if you're trying to get a business partner or an investor to go into business with you, that you're going to definitely need a business plan, because they're going to want to understand why should they invest with your business and why should they put their trust in you with their investment. How long should the business plan be? It depends. It kind of depends on the audience. If it's just for you, it can be short. If it's just a way for you to get organized and have your things down on paper, it can be very short. My advice, start with one page. I'm going to go through a one-page business plan example in a few slides, and then you can build it out more from there. What should you include? It depends on who your audience is. There's a lot of templates that you can find out there. We've got some on Score that I'm going to share links with you after the class. If you're applying for a business loan, the bank may have a predetermined format that they use. There's also business model canvases out there as a tool. There's lots of tools out there that you can find. There's some key components that you're going to want to have in your business plan. And one of the templates I'm going to share with you after the class, you'll see all those key components. My advice would be find a format that works for you that helps you tell your story. And then the question is, do you need one? Well, there's this expression, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. I mean, it really comes down to where do you want to go and how do you want to get there? And if you're trying to just kind of go week to week, day to day without any idea where you want to be 6, 12 months down the road, 2 years, 5 years down the road, who knows where you're going to end up? So that's just covers kind of the importance of creating a business plan. So what are some of the basics? And what are you really trying to accomplish with this? So I tried to highlight a few phrases on here. The business plan documents your business identity. It really kind of says, what's your mission? What's your value proposition? And then what are your strategies for achieving this specific business results? And there's different categories, which we're going to talk about in more detail. It is a writing process. And what you do when you go through this is think of these as prompts. It prompts you to understand your industry. It prompts you to understand your target customer. Do you really understand who your target customer is? Are you being specific enough? It prompts you to understand your competition. Have you researched enough locally or online who your competition is? Having a form to fill out, having a template to fill out where you've got to say, who is my competition? That forces you to do a little research and it prompts you to do this. And it prompts you how to think about how you differentiate from the competition. You know, we advise people to shop around websites, shop around locations if you're selling in, you know, a physical location or a retail location. And searching around, understanding what their strategies are, what's their pricing, what's their product, what's their marketing, what's their social media approach. Shopping the competition and understand, put yourself in the shoes of the customer is how is the customer going to pick me over that competition? The business planning process, it allows you to refine and validate your ideas on paper, and which can help you avoid some mistakes down the road. Oftentimes you may get stuck on certain areas, but that's okay. It's important to just keep trying to keep at it and trying to continue to do some research and understand what is out there. And eventually what you're going to find is as you start to get this process underway, it helps create some clarity and focus on where your business is going. Helps also create some confidence because you can complete your business planning process and say, I know where I'm going. I may not execute perfectly, but I know where I'm going. I know what my goals are. So that's important to do. Oftentimes where if you're starting out with a business, you may have a million different ideas and say, I want to do this, or maybe I want to do that. It's important to have some clarity and focus on what your strategy is going to be. There are oftentimes we have clients who have a few different products or services in mind. Our response is usually, if you're just starting out, focus on one thing or one family of products and try to market that to your customer. Get in the habit of running a business, learn how to sell, how to run your marketing campaign, how to run the actual business. You can always expand products and services down the road once you get the hang of it. So getting started, there's different sizes of business plans. I talked earlier about a back of the napkin concept. There's no real form for this one. This is more of just you coming up with notes and thinking about what am I trying to accomplish here? Who's my customer? What's my big idea? Answering those key questions a few slides ago. Then there's two different kind of plans that I think about. One is a one-page business plan, which I'm going to go through a sample, an example in a little bit, and we'll provide you a template for that tomorrow. Then there's also what I would call a traditional business plan, and I'm going to talk about the differences between the two of those. And depending upon what your needs are, you may decide that you need a traditional business plan because you're trying to get a loan or you're trying to get some investors. And that may be fine. You may need to start with a one-page one just to kind of get in the habit of how to do some business planning. And there's some key takeaways that I've got at the bottom here. It's not going to be perfect the first time. And I remember working with a client a couple of years ago they were getting a lot of their inventory from overseas. and they were thinking about building a physical location here and manufacturing their own product here. This is a pretty large business. And we talked through a business planning process, and he was not a writer by trade, right? He was an expert in the manufacturing business, but he just kept at it. And we went through, different iterations. It is an iterative process. We kicked around different ideas. We talked about, is this competition? Have you researched this market strong enough? Have you thought broadly enough beyond your own little, bubble that you're living in right now? Have you looked beyond the immediate geographic area? So the business planning process can be iterative. You don't feel like you have to nail it, once. It's kind of like writing a novel. I don't know if we have any writers on the call here, and I'm not a writer, but you've got to work at it. It's going to be an iterative process, and it's almost, think about it as never being done. It's kind of a living, breathing document that you're going to pick up from time to time to see how are my results comparing to what my business plan goals were, and not just the financial, but am I achieving my marketing strategy? Is my product resonating with my target customers? So the business planning process can be a bit iterative. And the first goal is just start writing. Start where you feel comfortable, and where you want to go from there. So I mentioned there's two different kinds of business plans. We're going to use the terms lean and traditional. My advice, if you've never done this before, or if you're a little bit rusty in doing business plan, start with the lean business plan model. It's one page. It's simple. It captures the information that you need. It's bullet points. It doesn't have to be like perfect grammar or prose. It's getting your ideas on paper. And it allows you to kind of make some iterations and course correct things if you're trying different things. And it also provides you some structure for research and planning as you're thinking about diving deeper on some of the topics. And it's a nice, easy read. If you're working with a mentor or a friend or another business owner, you can share one page with them and say, what do you think? And maybe you can talk through it a little bit, but at least they can read it quickly. The other thing that comes up sometimes when we're working with clients around business planning is if we have clients sometimes who say, I've got some ideas and I think I may want to do this, but I've also got an idea that I think I may want to do this. And maybe those two different ideas are completely different than each other. And I've had a couple clients like this, and they say, do I need to do a business plan, and do I need one or two? If the ideas, the products or the services are so different from each other, and the client that I'm thinking of, we did have somebody who had very different business ideas. We said, why don't you do 2 one-page business plans? Because you're going to have different strategies. You have different target customers. You have different competition, different sales strategies, completely different services. Do 2 different business plans. And because they're only one page, it wasn't a huge investment of time to do this. But it helped her get herself organized and think, if I want to spend my focus on this business right here, I've got a roadmap. So that's the lean business plan, which we're going to spend a little bit more time on in more detail. The traditional business plan is very detailed, and I'm not going to go deep on this today. We will provide a template to you afterwards from our SCORE website that you can use as a resource. But thinking of it being an expansion of the lean business plan, building out each topic into much more detail. It will include detailed financial projections. And this can really help you refine a lot of the ideas you have. And especially if you want to go deeper and you want to get a loan, or you want to attract some investors, a detailed business plan is going to be expected by them. That client I mentioned who is thinking about building the manufacturing facility here, their strategy was to work with an investor and to get bank financing. So we went really deep on the financial model, 5 years, a 5-year financial model, all the bells and whistles, revenue, detailed expenses, debt financing, equity, financing. And then we went really deep on the actual narrative business plan and building out all the various topics. And if you're going to be working with lenders, investors, they may expect something a little bit more detailed. Now, if you're going to be applying for a loan, again, highly recommend you're working with the lender and see what format they require. You may find that you can prepare a business plan for yourself that is maybe a little bit more than a lean business plan, but maybe it's got some details built out for the traditional business plan. And if you get a loan application from a bank, you may be able to cut and paste pieces from your own business plan into their form, into their template. But having something for yourself is a good way to move forward. So let's talk about the lean business plan. If you notice over on the left here, this is kind of a good way to depict the process. As I mentioned, it's somewhat iterative. You're going to think about researching, refining your business plan, and then working on your business plan. So you're going to be constantly thinking about kind of how do I want to refine this as I learn more information. Now, one point on that one, you don't want to take it to the extreme because you actually want to run your business. So you don't want to be planning every day, but it is a good idea to work on your business plan at least once a year. And maybe it's a few-week process. Maybe you update it and revise it from the previous year. And in terms of timing of when you do that, it's really up to you. Maybe there's a slower time of year that you can carve out some time to do that. But it's a good idea if you do a business plan and maybe you work on it for several weeks or a month or two, and then you feel like you've got a good, plan in place, and then you can kind of let the ink dry on it. And then you can kind of keep going on, running your business, working on things, referring back to it from time to time to see if your strategies and your goals are resonating in the actual running of your business is a good idea. And then you can also revisit things as you want to refresh your plan, maybe 6 or 12 months down the road, and say, all right, things have changed since I last did this. It's time to refresh it. Let me take what I learned from the last year of running my business and what I'm seeing in the market, what I'm hearing from customers, what I'm learning from the competition, and try to figure out how I want to refine my business plan for my goals for the next year. So the lean business plan, it says what it here. It's a high level view of the business identity that we talked about earlier. And there's a lot of resources out there, but the template that we'll share with you tomorrow is structured like this. So you'll notice that some of these things resonate back to the topics I talked about at the beginning. Now, the business model, think of it like an executive summary. What is the overall goal for your business? These next items in blue, what's the problem you're solving? What's the solution you're going to bring? Who's your target customer? And who are the competitions? That's the what. That's the what of your business. What are you trying to achieve? The items in green are the how. How are you going to sell? How are you going to market? And then you've got the who. Who is going to be your team and people that you're going to hire, whether they work for you or they're partners and resources. And then the last two items here are kind of what are the revenue and expense expectations? And then you've got milestones. What are you trying to achieve? So these are the categories to think about. And what I like about this format is it forces you to think about things holistically. Because you may say to yourself, well, I'm just going to do everything myself to start, but maybe you need an attorney. Maybe you've got a complex, relationship you need to enter into with a vendor. Maybe you need an attorney to help you draft an agreement. And that could be an external resource. Maybe you want to work with a SCORE mentor. Maybe you need a CPA to help you with your taxes. Maybe you haven't really thought about the competition, but having this box to fill out will help you really dive in and do your appropriate research and help figure that out. So here is an example. This is one that was prepared by one of our colleagues at SCORE. She taught a business planning class a couple of years ago, and she prepared this. And I think it's a great example because it really helps put this in perspective in terms of how do I fill this out. So this will be a good resource for you to kind of refer back to if you want to think about what's an example. So I know there's a lot of words in the page, so we're going to kind of go through this slowly. But let's just talk about what this business model is. There's a woman, Delilah Richards. She wants to start a flower business. And you can see she started with her business model up top. Think about this as the executive summary. So Flowers by Delilah is her business. It's a luxury floral boutique creating elegant floral arrangements for home, business, and special occasions. At Delilah's personal attention, the finest flowers and innovative designs are the hallmarks of our store. So that's kind of what's the elevator pitch for your business. This is what we're trying to achieve. It's telling you what they do. It's telling you why they're going to differentiate from their competition. But now we're going to go a little bit deeper. What's the problem they're trying to solve? So Delilah is basically saying there are people out there who appreciate luxurious, fresh, beautiful flowers every day or for special occasions, and there aren't enough options. So what are we going to do about it? What's our solution? We create beautiful floral arrangements with the finest flowers inspired by our clients and the artistry of our professional designers. Here's the customer's problem. Here's the solution. Who's Delilah's customers? Well, she's gone in and said, I'm going to identify who my target customers are. Upper middle class households with a disposable income, corporate and professional offices, upscale restaurants, brides-to-be, wedding planners, event planners. So notice that she has been very specific in terms of the demographic, whether it's individual customers, whether it's companies, whether it's other businesses who are going to be, in the service business like restaurants or wedding planners. And also she's identified a target demographic in terms of their salary, in terms of their income. So she's been very specific in her customer profile. That will actually help her in terms of her marketing activities, because now she knows who her target customer is. Now she has to figure out, where do they go and how do I find them? But first, she has to understand her competition. So online floral delivery, why are they not as good as her? They're generic, they're low cost, they're not as fresh. Well, low cost is a good thing for the customer, but if they're generic and not as fresh, maybe that's not going to resonate with our clients who want something nicer. Local florists, also generic, they're low cost, but they're not a dedicated business. Metropolitan aerial floral designers, distance and convenience is something that, for consideration. So she's researched the competition for her business and tried to figure out, what do they do that's good, or where are their weaknesses, and how can I capitalize on those weaknesses? So now that's the what, those 4 boxes right there. And notice these are bullets. They're not fully framed out sentences and novels. They're ideas to get on the page to help generate more ideas in the future. So now we get into the how. Sales channels. She's going to have a storefront, but she's also going to do online while staying true to her values. Marketing activities. She's going to have her website. She's also going to try to advertise on Facebook. She's also going to consider personal sales to businesses, wedding, and event planners. So notice that she's trying to tailor her marketing activities to her target customers. Team and key roles. How is she going to get this done? She's going to have herself. She's going to be the owner and the kind of the chief strategy person. And then she's going to also have a designer and store and delivery staff. Who are her partners and resources? Well, she's going to need a flower supply firm. So she's got a New England flower supply and local flower farms. And then she's going to also work with, clients for understand client relationships. So you notice near the bottom of that previous slide, I talked about revenue and expenses. And yes, you are going to need some detail. You're going to need to start preparing some spreadsheets and thinking about how much revenue, how much expenses. But for starters, for this 1-page plan, let's just talk about what the revenue and expenses are. So she's going to generate revenue from flower arrangements and design consultation. And her goal is to have repeat business cultivated through excellence in service. So she's focusing on top line service and resonating with a client base that is going to appreciate and value and pay for that service. Her expenses are going to be storefront, refrigeration, inventory, employees, transportation. So she's got the inventory of expenses that she's going to need to spend. She doesn't have it all figured out yet, but she's at least got the inventory of items she's going to need to account for in her budget. Milestones. She wants to be profitable in 12 months, and she wants to have 75% recurring clients. So 1-page business plan. It's lean, as you can see. It's bullet points. It's a way for you to take the ideas that you've got in your head and get them down on paper. Now, the example I'm using here is somebody who's just starting out, who hasn't even started a business yet, and they're trying to figure out what to do. Now, you may be saying to yourself, I've been in business for 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. I've already been in business. Do I need to do this? It depends. If you are feeling like you are not as well organized as you'd like, if you feel like you've been running your business for a while and you know a lot of things, but you're not quite sure how you can do better, this may be a good exercise for you to get yourself organized and understand where you have your strengths, where you have your weaknesses, and where the opportunities are going forward. A lot of times, if you've been in business for a long time, you know a lot about the competition. You also know a lot about yourself. You know what you do well, you know what the competition does well. So you are probably more informed in terms of doing something like this. And you may also have had some ideas that you haven't had a chance to implement yet, whether it's different sales or marketing strategies that you can get into this equation. So it depends if you think this is valuable or not. You may have already done something like this in the past to help get yourself organized. And then you may say to yourself, do I need to do something a little bit more detailed? And the answer may be yes. So that's the lean business plan. We'll give you a template, a Word document that is structured similar to this. that you can type in and get yourself organized. Now, a traditional business plan, this is a little bit more detailed. So we'll send you a link to, I'm not going to go through an example of this one because it would take a long time to go through the details of this, but thinking about a traditional business plan, building out in more details what is included in the lean business plan. So you're going to put more specificity around this. Maybe as an example, maybe your section on the competition has got a lot more about the market. Maybe it's talking about what's the market for your service locally and nationally. Maybe it's talking about consumer trends for this type of industry. Maybe your marketing plan has deeper research on where your target customers spend a lot of their time, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or shopping in person. But again, like the lean business plan process, the traditional business plan has that same iterative process. You're planning, you're researching, you're refining. You're continuing to think through how things are going. And again, you're not planning every single week of the year because you have a business to run, but you're trying to carve out that time to organize your thoughts, organize your planning processes in the appropriate categories, and trying to have your goals going forward. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a highly detailed, it requires deeper research. You're going to need some financial projections, which may include some cash flow budgeting, which we talked about in May. It may include some more detailed revenue and balance sheet and income statement and balance sheet templates, depending upon who the business plan is for. If you're looking for a sophisticated investor to come in, you may need some pretty robust financial projections. So again, it's a similar concept of the lean business plan. It's just building out in more detail. So what's included in there? So you can see similar topics to what's in the lean plan. You've got a description of the business. You've got products and services that you're going to offer. What's your marketing plan? What's your operational plan? How are you going to be organized? Who's going to be working in the company? If you're going to be seeking financing from somebody, how are you going to use that financing? You may be saying, I want $100,000 to get started for my business. And, if you come in, you can buy in for an equity, or maybe you can lend me the money. They're going to want to know how you're going to use that money. Financial forecasts. You're going to want to understand your startup expenses. If you're just starting your business, how much are you going to need to spend before your business is open and operational and you're collecting your first dollar of revenue? Because you're going to need some financing for that. You may finance that yourself through savings. You may borrow some money from family or friends, or you may be seeking a loan. You're going to want to do a cash flow projection. For how long? I would say, depending upon the circumstance, my advice to people, if you're going out for financing, they're going to probably want like 3 to 5 years. If you're just doing this for yourself and you're just starting out and trying to figure out, where do I start? My advice is do a monthly cash flow plan for at least the next 2 years, a good 24-month period. If you're going to start working on this tomorrow, maybe do a cash flow plan for the rest of this year and all of next year for 18 months and start from there. And then you may be, asked to prepare an income statement and a balance sheet. And there's a lot of good models and templates out there that help you kind of put a lot of inputs in, and it creates the financial output. And that's something you can work with a SCORE mentor on. I know that's something I've helped clients with as well, who needed a really slick financial model because they were going to be working with investors. So the traditional plan has got a lot more details. The one thing I skipped on this slide was the first item, which is the executive summary. This is kind of the introduction to the business. It's kind of the first thing you look at when you're reading the summary of the business. The advice you always hear about an executive summary is to do it last, because it's a culmination of everything else you've done underneath it. The executive summary should be exactly what it says, a brief summary of what everything they're going to read in the business. So you've done a business plan, you've started one, you've at least got an idea about where you want to go forward. You want to turn those business plans into actions. So the most important thing in turning plans into actions are creating SMART goals. So you may have heard this before. I felt this was probably important to cover as part of planning, because sometimes you may get a plan and say, now what? So creating milestones and creating goals for yourself are important, and making sure that the connectivity of all the topics across your business, all the aspects of running your business, the marketing, the sales, the financial, the resource plan, the staffing, the partners, You want to make sure your goals for those are all connected in some way in terms of assumptions. So for instance, you can't assume that you're going to sell, to 5 customers and generate, $1 million of revenue. Those goals, unless you're selling, $200,000 a pop to those 5 people, those goals are going to be out of whack with each other. So you want to make sure there's some connectivity amongst your goals. So what does SMART mean? It's an acronym here. So the S stands for specific. You want to make sure you got some specificity in terms of what you're trying to achieve. Measurable, make sure you know when the goal is completed. It's got to have some sort of outcome-based measurement there. Attainable, stretch goals are good, but you want to make sure it's something that's attainable. You don't want to set goals that are a layup that you can easily accomplish, because you want to stretch yourself as a business owner. But you also want to make sure that your goals are something that you can achieve with the resources that you have, whether they're financial or capabilities. So attainable, keeping that in mind. Relevant, making sure the goal is important for your business. If you've got a goal on a page and you say to yourself, I want to achieve this in the next 6 months, if you can't figure out why that's very important for your business to be successful, it may not be relevant, and you can take it off the list. And then time-based, you want to have some sort of inclination of when that goal is going to be completed. So I'm going to do a little example here of SMART goals and what I would call not so SMART goals. So there's 3 goals here. You can see they're out here, and I'll give you kind of a example of why these work or not. So the first one is the goal is to reduce rental costs by 10% by the end of this year. What am I going to do for my task? I'm going to negotiate terms with my landlord. I'm going to work with my lawyer to drop a contract. What is my success criteria? I'm going to have a 2-year lease with a 10% reduction in my rent. I want to get that done by December 31st. And then in terms of resources, I'm going to need to spend some legal fees, but I need to find out how much. Is that a SMART goal? Yes. My next goal, I'm going to increase my sales. My task is going to be, I'm going to find some customers and sell to them. What's my success criteria? I'm going to have higher sales. I'm going to try to get this done this year. And then I think I'm going to need some salespeople. Well, for a number of reasons, this is not a SMART goal. It's not very specific. There's not a lot of, you can't really measure it. There's no real time element to it. And it may or may not be attainable. So, not a SMART goal. This last one here, you're going to try to achieve an average monthly customer count of 500 within 3 months. Here are the tasks you're going to do: advertising, social media outreach, do some marketing. Here's some success criteria. You're going to build your customers from 400 to 450 to 500 by month 3. You're going to try to get this done by September. And here are the resources you need in terms of advertising and some website upgrade. Again, a SMART goal here because it's got a lot of specificity into it. And based on where this business is, they feel like that it's attainable. So these are just some examples as you're thinking about what your goals are for your business coming off of your business plan and trying to think through, how do I make these SMART goals and ensure that they're going to be, what I want them to be and help me achieve my overall business goals. So resources. There's a lot of items that are out there for business planning. When you get this document tomorrow and you get the webinar recording, when you get that tomorrow, I'll also email you the 1-page business plan template that you can use. It'll be a Word document. There'll also be a link to this detailed business plan template, which is on the SCORE website. And it is I think it's like a 30-page template that you can use that kind of builds out into more detail. And then there's also a number of resources that we have on our website at score.org. There's a whole financial statement template gallery and business planning gallery. And here's some examples of some things that you can use. There's also, in terms of business plan writing, we also have a series on our website called Simple Steps for Starting Your Business. There's some good business guides out there in terms of helping you frame your business plan goals and kind of what you want to get out there and what's important to have included in there. And then the detailed business plan template that you'll get has got some really good guidance in it. I'd recommend checking that out because it helps you think through the important aspects of including different components of your plan. And then also recommend you work with a SCORE mentor. This is something that we spend a lot of time on with our clients, is doing a business plan. Not everyone, because some of them don't really need it at that stage of their business. But if we've got a client who's kind of spinning a little bit or trying to figure out where they need to go, a lot of times we'll go through this exercise, and we usually start with the 1-page business plan to help them get their ideas on paper, refine it and craft it, and give them a path forward. And then also, if you want to revisit the budgeting tips, one we did back in May on our Lunch and Learn series, you can find that on our YouTube channel where we went through budgeting tips on how to manage your cash flow. You can talk through that as well. So we talked about SCORE mentors. With that, I think, Kathleen, if you were there, if you can start our next poll, and then we can, this is if you're interested in a SCORE mentor, we can help you with that afterwards.
Will do.
All right, thank you. So if you'd like to answer that, if you get a chance, that'd be great. And then, so kind of what's next? You know, my advice for folks is it's not easy to do this because you may have the blank page, you know, syndrome, where you're looking at the blank piece of paper and thinking, where do I start? Look at some examples, think back to what we talked about today. That example with the flower shop, use that to help generate some ideas. And most importantly, just start writing, start getting your ideas out. You know what you want to accomplish for your business. You know what your goals are. Start writing, do a little bit more research. You know, the other thing I would encourage you to do is, it's kind of hard to do this in fits and starts. It's kind of hard to say, all right, I'm going to sit down. I got a half an hour on my calendar. I'm going to sit down and work on my business plan. Because you kind of have to be in the right frame of mind. It's almost like I say to people sometimes, you can't just wake up one day, okay, today I'm going to be strategic. You've got to be in the right frame of mind to think about the strategy and business plan for your business. So my recommendation, carve out a couple hours in your schedule. Find the time in your calendar. If you think it's important that you do this exercise, carve out the time. And then as you're planning for that, leading up to that, you know, Friday from 9 to 11, I'm going to work on my business plan. As you're getting through Wednesday and Thursday, start the idea percolation process in your brain and thinking, how am I going to wake up Friday morning, ready to hit the ground running and go forward? And then you can also revisit, you know, some of these topics we talked about over the last several weeks. We've got our financial module that we did in May, and then the marketing series that we did over the last week and a half. A lot of this is intended to help connect together. So we can revisit some of that content as well to help you out. So with that, I think we will open it up for Q&A. If there's any questions in the Q&A box, or if you have any, feel free to drop a question in. And or Kathleen, anything you would add that I may have missed?
I don't have anything to add, really, but I did want us to maybe go back to the one-page business plan and talk through how can people dig more deeply into the difference from their competition. This is where I find most of my clients struggle. And in my mind, the story, that workshop that we did last Wednesday would help people in that regard. But I thought it might be helpful to just even dig a little deeper into this business right now and say, what could be even better, potential better answers to those questions about the customer profile and the competitors, and how different Flowers by Delilah would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think the competition is a tricky one, because when you're looking at the competition for your business, your inclination is to say, okay, I'm going to look at flower shops. What are other independent local flower shops that I'm going to be competing with? But then you also have to consider, are there other businesses that are also selling flowers, grocery stores, for example? Then you also have to ask yourself, am I really competing with businesses that are going to be, that are going to be attractive to customers for their disposable income? So if a client has got disposable income that they're going to be spending their money on, they may choose to buy flowers at business A or business B, but they also may choose to buy flowers or buy something else. So that becomes very tricky in terms of thinking about who your competition is and who your target customers are. I think it's good that you brought up both of those together, because they go hand in hand. And also knowing where your customers are, where they're going to be buying, what their buying behavior is, where they're going to be shopping, and where that competition is, they really do go hand in hand.
Yeah, it's hard for me to tell what these customers are actually looking for that's not being served in the market today. And so, and the reason I'm honing in on that is because that's where I see almost all my clients struggle, is exactly right here. It's articulated sort of nebulously when it's the more precision would help.
Mm-hmm.
So if everyone really thinks hard about that, and let people who are your friends or colleagues or somebody challenge you there, or have a score mentor challenge you there, because the better you get at those two things, the more the rest of this is going to flow successfully. And we do have a Q&A, a question in the question box, which is, from Joanne, can I do a business plan without knowing the price of my products as of yet?
The answer is yes. Where you can do most of your business planning without knowing the price of your products yet. However, there will be a key step in this where you're going to have to ask yourself, is this a viable business? And what I mean by that is, will you generate enough revenue and profit to be able to make this a sustainable business for whatever your goals are? And your goals can be different. They could be, I want this to be my sole source of income. Or it could be, I want to do this as a hobby and make a little bit of money. And so depending upon what your goals are, you can go pretty far down the process. Now, when it comes to the pricing, where you have to, and we'll probably do a class on pricing in the future, the pricing considerations are, there's a lot there. There's, how much does it cost you if you're selling a product, how much does it cost you to make that product or buy and then resell that product? If you're doing a service, are you pricing out by hour or by project that you're doing? The understanding what the price market is can be very tricky. Understanding what the competition is charging for similar type products or services, and then trying to figure out what your customers are willing to pay. So there's this concept in economics called price elasticity. And what that means is that, businesses can, increase their prices only so far before a customer is going to say, I no longer see the value in what that business is selling at that price point, or I can find something good enough over here at another business and I'm going to go elsewhere. So that's one side of the elasticity. The other side is the business can lower their prices so much they attract all the customers that they can get, but they may not be making enough money. And so that they may go out of business because they're not generating enough revenue. That tension in terms of the customer and the company and the business is what's called pricing elasticity. And basically, the tighter that, those forces are operating against each other, and think about it as a rubber band eventually snapping. That's where you get kind of broken pricing markets. So it's really tricky to figure out. And some of it is trial and error, and a lot of it is doing research and what's going on in the market. You can definitely do this kind of exercise without knowing what your price point is. But as part of that back of the napkin step that I talked about at the beginning, one of those key questions was, what's my revenue model? How am I going to make money? It's a good idea to have some general sense of, what am I going to charge? Maybe it's a range. You don't know what the price point is going to be yet, but at least know a range. And then what's it going to cost to run my business, so that you can do some at least high level, or what I would call top-down math, to say, could this be a viable business? So I'd recommend doing something like that as part of a back of the napkin process before going too far down the path of mapping out a detailed business plan, if that helps. Kathleen, anything you'd add?
No, I was just going to reinforce what you said in terms of, it's helpful to have some kind of ballpark. In other words, is it $2, $20, $2,000? Because one of the steps in your business plan, if you haven't started yet, is to determine whether it's viable. And it's kind of hard to do that without having some, at least in the ballpark range.
Right.
Because sometimes just putting some number down helps people see the reality of how many units I would have to make in order to generate enough revenue.
Right.
And can I physically do that myself, for example?
Right.
So it's, you can start it for sure. And then it might be helpful to say, what's the minimum price? What's the maximum price? And then pick somewhere kind of in the middle just to get started with after you've done the rest of it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Having that sort of framework, at least to give you a range of options, because you may find that if you think about what your hour, if you're, offering a consulting service and you have an hourly rate, and you think about, well, this is the hourly rate that I can charge, and that's the market, and this is how much I need to charge, and this is how many hours I need to work, and this is how much money I want to make over the course of a week. If you do that math and it says you've got to bill out 60 hours a week, that's probably unreasonable. So then you may have to revisit, is my service really, is this a viable business, right? And that would, the indication would be, no, it's not a viable business. So, as just an example, but that same aspect of, well, if I want to make X amount of revenue, per week, and my price point for my product is Y, and I divide X divided by Y, and I say, I've got to sell 1,000 units a week. Well, can you sell 1,000 units a week? Can you make 1,000 units a week? Like, that's where you have to start asking the assumptions around your goals. Are your goals achievable, and all your goals across all of these categories in sync with each other? All right. Any other questions? We've got a few minutes left if we have any other ones.
We don't have any in the Q&A box. If anyone would like to ask a question, either out loud, you can raise your hand, or type something in the Q&A box. We'd certainly welcome your questions. One question I would have is, given that 9 people responded to the initial survey and 6 of them were professional or services, they're talking about charging oftentimes for their time, for example. And one of the questions that should be somewhere in the business plan is, what activities are necessary to get a client, or how long does it take to get a client, for example? One of the things that's perpetually confounding for my clients who are in this situation is how long it takes for them to get a client, how long the process is to get a client. And so how would you suggest they kind of factor that in when crafting their business plan?
Yeah, I think that can be part of the marketing and sales strategy. As I think about the written part of the plan, in terms of understanding your lead time, trying to understand what I would call a pipeline management process. So you may find that you have a whole list of clients or prospects, I should say, a list of prospects that you're going to try to target proactively, in addition to doing marketing and advertising to try to have clients contact you. Having a strategy around your prospect management. How are you going to contact them? How often? How are you going to handle responses? Are you going to do all that work yourself? Or are you going to have somebody help you with that? Having a system in place to manage a prospect list and how you're going to contact them. Part of that is, we talked about the operational aspects of how your business is going to run. I think that can be part of your sales and marketing plan. Where that leads into the financial aspect can be thinking about how your revenue and expenses are going to emerge over time. So, if you're in a professional services business and you're doing a lot of lead generation and you're doing consulting, your revenue is going to probably be pretty variable over the course of a year. Month to month, it could vary wildly. So in terms of doing some financial projections, it may be very difficult to do, because you may say, well, I don't know if I'm going to get that money in May or June, or July. And that's okay, but you could have some overall goals that say, I'm going to try to get, 10 or I'm going to try to get 10 client contracts this year. And I'm going to try to have 5 of them in the first half of the year and 5 of them in the second half of the year. And whether you get them in April or May or June, it may not matter, but at least you're going to try to get those 5 contracts in. The other tricky thing that can happen when you're doing financial projections is if you've got that lead time can have a situation where I've got a client who is in the book publishing business, and she could have revenue coming in now. They may pay in advance, but she could have a tail on when her expenses get paid out several months down the road. So you may have to factor that into your cash flow planning. If you're hiring outside vendors or paying people to do work, your expenses may be getting paid later than your revenue. So there's a lot of different aspects to that. But it can be complicated. But the more you learn about your business and the more you know about your client's behavior can help you tailor a planning strategy to whatever outcome you think you need to plan for, if that makes sense.
And do you think it would be helpful for people just starting out to almost straight line it and say this much a quarter and have it be kind of similar, except for maybe the ramp up phase in the very beginning? Because otherwise that seasonality or that variability could get complex really quickly. And I think that's what trips a lot of people up.
Yeah.
So as long as they kind of hit it within a year, I mean, is that what you would advise people to do to make it simpler?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're, I advise people to try to do a cash flow plan by month, but a lot of times they may say, well, I have no idea when the money's going to come in. But I say, okay, well, if you're shooting for, $24,000 of revenue next year, maybe put in your budget $2,000 a month. And if you get to the end of January and you have, $500 of revenue, you're behind, right? So, you need to, make a little bit up more in the next month to catch up, but if you do great in the first month and you planned for $2,000, but you got a big contract and it was $5,000, but you have no other leads coming in, no other prospects right now, don't get too excited because you were hoping to get another 2,000 next month and you may not get that. So I think for financial purposes, you can do that. You can straight line your revenue assumptions and work towards more of some macro goals. Like I'm going to put $2,000 a month in my cash flow budget, but I really know I'm trying to get 6,000 for the first 3 months for the quarter, or I'm really shooting for 12,000 for the first half of the year. Now you have to be careful in terms of managing your liquidity. And what I mean by that is, if your budget assumes you're going to get, 2,000 a month, but you also have some expenses coming out. And for those of you who saw the cash flow budgeting session, you'll remember some of these, ups and downs of your cash flow. You have to be mindful of that, because if you say, well, I'm not worried about the revenue I didn't get in January and February and March because I've got a big client that I know is going to come in for June, so I'll be fine by the time I get to June. If you have some big cash payments that are due in the early part of the year, you have to make sure you got the cash on hand to pay those. So a lot of these things go hand in hand as you're thinking about budgeting and cash flow management, if that helps.
Thanks. That's it. No more questions.
All right. So I will stop the recording. Actually, before I do that, why don't we mention, I guess we probably want to mention our YouTube channel, right, Kathleen?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you all for joining today's session. I hope you got a lot out of it. If you are interested in learning more about SCORE, you can go to score.org. And if you are watching this video on our YouTube channel, be sure to subscribe. You can see all sorts of webinars we have on a variety of topics, whether it's marketing or financial or legal or operations. We've got a lot of webinars out there for your benefit. And again, if you need any other help or resources, you can contact us at score.org. And thanks everybody for joining today.